All right, so let's take a look at how the XML can be integrated with a database, right? Where you might have data that is already stored in several tables that you might want to join, and you want to export it into a file that can then be transformed. This is very useful, especially if you're doing migrations. Migrations is a process of you have data that might be stored to a legacy system that has been around for a while, and that it's not particularly well normalized, as there might be some redundancy. The naming convention is fairly outdated, and you want to migrate it either because you're changing, going to a different vendor, or you are going to the cloud. Right, all the data has been stored in these machines for quite a while. They're legacy systems, and you want to move this information to the cloud. But the representation on the cloud, it might be that it's much flatter. The one that you might have in your machine in your legacy system is much more normalized, and you need to go into a more denormalized representation. Or yours is very specific to your domain, but the target data store is very generic, right? And you need to do a conversion. So oftentimes you need to extract the data from a source data set, right, and then needs to be converted and massaged, right, as you whatever your target data source needs, right. So here's an example on using Java that can be used, low-level JDBC to connect to a database that as it's iterating over all the content, it can generate the rows that come out from the result set. You can then iterate over it and generate XML elements that can then perhaps go through an xslt transformation that can do grouping. It can do denormalizing or normalizing, right? And you can transform it and massage it in which way you want to then import it. So here we're generating all sorts of XML elements as we extract the data from the result set and generate, for instance, a resulting XML document. Now this is us doing it manually from using JDBC or and just spitting out the content or writing to a file. Now there are tools and libraries that already do this. This is such a common use case, right? That there are already tools that are fairly mature that do this. So here's one of them. It's called the web row set, right? That you can just point it into a to a data set, right? And the result set that you come back with JDBC, you can feed it into this into the row set API, right? And it will generate an XML document that contains all your information from the source database, right? Including all the schema, all the constraints, right? That that the minimum, maximum, any referential integrity. So it's very, very thorough, right? So you can configure what the names of the tables and the output XML document you can configure as well. So for instance, here's an example of the result set, right? That even the transformation, the transaction isolation level, right, is also included in there, right? It displays the entire schema, all the different columns, right? The names of the columns, where they were, in which order they were described, the names of the columns, the whether what data type they are, right? Whether integers or varchar, or so it extracts the entire data set, including the metadata of the schema of how it's structured, and then it'll go and extract each single result set, right, and create elements, right, that describe each one of the data and store it in a separate XML file. You can then, once you, it's a standard format that you can then pass it through your own xslt transformation and do whatever you want. You can flatten it, you can make it more hierarchical, right? And again, targeting whatever your target database might be, and then you can import it, right? So web row set can work both ways. It can extract from a relational database and generate an equivalent XML document, or vice versa. It can take an XML document and then import it into your relational database, and vice versa. So it's very, very powerful, and again, it's pretty standard. So here's just an example on how you would use it from Java. Okay.